Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook?
Straight in.
I'll tell you what, it's my favourite part of the week is getting together with you, Mike, and chewing the fat, mate.
On podcast, we love it. Yeah. And I think the listenership has been rising, hasn't it? Slowly but surely.
I'll tell you what, mate, it's phenomenal when I look at it in comparison to a half dozen things. The downloads, the trajectory of the downloads. Obviously, it's not reached a half dozen things yet, but we've got to remember I've been doing a half dozen things for 2.5 years now.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it'll all end up a bit like that Joe Wicks fella, you know, that geezer who had some followers.
Oh, no.
That one, that one with the long hair and the slim body and what have you. But yeah, he just sort of took off at lockdown. I'm not saying I hope there's another lockdown, but I'm thinking at some point it's just going to go bananas. But it's lovely every time someone just sort of weaves their way out of the woodwork and gives us a bit of feedback. I had Victoria, who recently tried the peer-to-peer group, and I had a chat with her on the phone the other day, and she just said how inspirational we are in the podcast and whatever. I just thought it's amazing getting.
Well, I think, and I. Do you know what? I go around the country and deliver training, and it's great when people come up to you and say, "Yeah, I listen to the podcast." And you think, well, oh really? It's such a shock, and I don't know why it should be such a shock, but it's great, isn't it? It really does make it worthwhile. And I think we never set out to be in. This is not a training. It's not an instructional thing. No. I'm sure that the listeners get information from it, which I think they find useful, and we know that from the feedback we've been getting. But we never mean for it to be like a training it's just what was the three of us, now the two of us, just literally chewing the cud over
it's some musings,
transport stuff, and
it's musings, and I think more than anything, I think sometimes we end up asking more questions than answers anyway, isn't it? But
definitely.
And I think today's no different to any other. The big question for Mike and I is Driver CPC working time? The reason that question's come about is I gave someone some advice on Messenger, dropped me a message on Messenger asking me to do a podcast actually on the subject, and does it count as working time, for which I gave an answer. And one of my very respected associates, Tom, gave some alternative advice. So Mike and I went away and had a bit of a look, actually, because the advice I gave was that if a driver isn't paid for Driver CPC, then it can be taken as part of their weekly rest. And the conflicting advice had been that Driver CPC is working time. Someone is not freely disposing of their time because they have to be on a Driver CPC course, which is a perfectly acceptable response as well. And interestingly, there's an element of us both being right. So, and this is sometimes a challenging thing in the industry to give people some context, because I never saw that rule in writing. I was told it, and I can't remember now because it was back in. So the query was actually back in 2019, sort of during the course of the last influx of Driver CPC training, and I was hell bent that it was a DVSA examiner. I can't remember exactly which one, but I attended a couple of new operator seminars that year, and the question came up, and it was quite categoric that if a driver is not paid to attend CPC, he can attend as part of his weekly rest. So I took that as categoric, and that's always been the advice moving forward, as you do.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I also want to make the point that I think that Tom's sort of partly right as well, because in the spirit of the law and in the spirit of working time and morally, Driver CPC is working time. So I'm not arguing that at all. But Mike, I sort of posed the question to you, and you went away and did a bit of research yesterday, didn't you?
Yeah, and it is it's something that I've learned over the years to avoid during training courses. But people tend to think that everything is black and white, and you're a trainer, you know the law. What can I do? Can I do this or can I do that? Can't I do this? Can't I do that? And like a lot of law, it comes down to interpretation and how not only how you interpret it, but more importantly, how a traffic commissioner or a magistrate's court's going to interpret it.
Sorry, I'm just waving at Mike. I want to turn the heat.
Turn
down.
the heating down.
Are you okay?
We've struggled with temperature today.
I'm
here,
sweating my tits
yeah,
off,
it is
mate.
getting a bit warm. Yeah.
I'm turning it down if that's all right.
Just
Sorry, you carry on, mate. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Full flow.
Showing off that we've got
aircon,
super duper aircon and heating in here and everything. So so it is down to interpretation, isn't it? And how each individual, maybe even if you speak to a DVSA officer, I know they're very guarded in giving specific. They will give generic advice, but very. So I went away and looked at it, and of course the definition of working time is in, the definition of rest is in EC 561 2006. But the way it's written, you've got to remember it's been written in. It's not even, it was written by the European Union and they have to use a language that is acceptable across the whole of the EU, etc., etc. So sometimes interpretation is difficult. So we look to the guidance that the DVSA give us, and the DVSA say that...
Do you want me to read it?
Yes, go on, let's read it, get it verbatim,
Because this is verbatim off the Gov website. Training related to obtaining/retaining a driver certificate of professional competence in brackets CPC, where the training is at the request or instigation of an employer, i.e. this is referring to what's classed as working time. However, so in the context of working time, I probably should have made that clearer. So in the context of working time, this is working time. Training related to obtaining, retaining a driver certificate of professional competence, CPC, where the training is at the request or instigation of an employer. Driver CPC training can only be undertaken during rest periods if the driver is attending voluntarily and not at the request of the employer.
Yeah, so there's actually two things at play here, really. There's two different pieces of legislation. You've got the working time rules, the road transport regulations, and you've also got the driver's hours rules, which define rest. And if you're interrupting your rest to go on some training, that cannot be counted as a part of your weekly rest. And therefore also the training has to count towards your working time as well when you're calculating your working time under the road transport regulations, the working time rules. So my interpretation is that if there is an obligation for you to be there, it's not so much the pay, it's the obligation.
Hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. Flagship Partners offer a range of consultancy and training services to ensure that our customers remain compliant and have the best possible knowledge to be able to fulfill their work. If you're interested in support with any of our safety, HR or compliance services, or you want to train to be a transport manager or need driver CPC training, give us a call today.
When I think about it from a moral point of view, driver CPC morally and ethically is clearly working time.
Yeah.
As is any work-related training. And however, that then presents its own set of challenges for operators because, I wouldn't be surprised, I don't know categorically, but I wouldn't be surprised if on occasion on a Saturday I might have trained someone who hasn't had 9 hours of daily rest since the end of their last shift.
Yeah.
Would you say that's fair? And
Absolutely.
I imagine there's a lot of trainers up and down the country that would vouch for that.
We know, and when they slip something in towards the end of the course, like, great, I can have a couple of hours and I'm
off out.
I'm starting to, a night shift, and you suddenly realise actually they're night workers and they've come in during the day. Yeah. No, I thought that, we've got a no snore guarantee here, of course, so we do keep them awake, but then you realise why. But and it's always an ethical problem then for the trainer.
I've certainly trained people who I think it probably has put them over a 15-hour shift that day as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Additionally too. So, ethically challenging and morally too. So, from that point of view, I think if you're a company that wants to do the right thing, obviously what the legislation stating there is if you're paying for driver CPC and you're paying a person to attend, it's categorical.
Part of their working week. It's a part of their working week. So
that is working time. So if at any time you're paying a driver to attend, that is working time for their working week. I think the greyness comes out of this voluntarily element of where you may put on a course and then it's voluntarily up to a driver to turn up for one of the free courses that you've on for them on an annual basis. Where I know there's the large majority of companies out there would expect that to be part of a driver's weekly rest. Now, that makes total sense, and I think obviously from an operational point of view, I think there's a lot of companies out there that are doing it, and I'm sure if the contract was worded in such a way that said the company will put on 3 CPC courses a year, you are able to voluntarily attend one of those CPC courses in a year to ensure that you maintain your driver CPC. It's probably quite hard to challenge that against what we're reading there. But is it the letter of the law or the spirit of the law?
Yeah, and I suppose you'll only find out. People say, "Well, come on, tell me what is it? What should I do? Shouldn't I do?" You can't. The only way you're going to find out normally when something goes terribly wrong, and you're having to explain it to either a magistrate or a judge or a traffic commissioner. So, I think it's definitely worth giving some thought to how each individual company does that and handles it. I think that's probably the message there. And look at each individual circumstance as it falls. But yeah, it is a tricky one, isn't it? That's the interesting thing about this industry. It occasionally kicks up things like that, and you think, well, actually, when you give it some thought, I mean, I've always considered it to be working time because, as you say, like the spirit of the thing, they're there. They're not. I don't think I've ever had anybody come on a driver CPC course who said, I don't really need to come on this course, but I had nothing better to do today, so I thought I'd drop in and. That's never happened. So
I'm really shit at my driver's hours, and I'd love to learn more. I'd love to learn some more.
I'd love to come and do some extra tuition. I've never had that happen. So you could say, well, that's totally voluntary. It's no different for them to going down to the library and getting a book out and reading about it all day. So, but I don't think it's ever happened. So I've always considered it to be working time. Although I appreciate, as you say, Pete, it won't be the first time that I've had somebody on the course who clearly, treats it as if it isn't. But
I think from a commercial point of view, I would say a lot of the time, I think if we were to do a poll or do a survey of the industry across the country, I would say that the large majority of operators expect drivers to be voluntarily turning up free of charge for a course that they've put on. It's a tricky thing based on what I've read anyway on that information that's available to us.
Yeah, I suppose you think about I suppose probably even another podcast, but driver gets into work on Monday morning having done a CPC on a Saturday. There is certainly, whether that is again, what point would they need to do a manual entry to cover Saturday? So if they're going to do a manual entry, that kind of tells me that's working time, isn't it? So that's what they would have to do. They would have to put 7 hours of working time, not forgetting to put some breaks in, or it'd have to be more than 7 hours because you need to put some breaks in there as well, wouldn't you? So that kind of answers the question, doesn't it? If they're going to do a manual entry on Monday to say what they did on Saturday, or are they going to just put just consider that to be rest? And that's
until now, yeah.
Yeah, and then I suppose the dodgy thing that you get stopped, the DVSA, they download your tachograph. I've no idea whether this is actual fact or fiction, but let's say the DVSA have access to your driver records. And they say, "Oh, you attended a driver CPC course on Saturday. Where's the record for it?" Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's largely untested, isn't it? So I guess as ever, let's put it to the listeners. Get in touch. Let us know. How do you manage driver CPC in your business? Is it classed as working time? Do you class it as rest? And do we know of anyone that has had any enforcement? On the subject is the key.
Do you know what? It's the same with all this. When you hear about things like we've done this one to death, I know, but the 28-day rule. let's have some people coming to us and say, yes, not I know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, but yes, that's happened to one of our drivers. Yes, there was enforcement action taken. So, because that's what you don't get to hear about, is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You never get to hear about that.
Like anything, I think that's what causes so much hearsay in the industry, is that actually a lot of the enforcement, or the roadside enforcement, I know a lot of what goes via the Office of the Traffic Commissioner is largely publicly held information, but obviously from an enforcement point of view, we don't get to hear. People don't like to share that information. But I think it'd be great if we had a bit more of a transparency around that enforcement, because it gives people a lot more to learn, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And evidence to
evidence-based.
Evidence-based. I'd much rather have approached this podcast from an evidence-based. The only evidence we had is what's publicly available on the internet, but we had no evidence of any enforcement or anything like that, which would have been great to have added to the debate. So, absolutely fantastic. So hopefully that's been of interest to people.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And these odd questions crop up, and it leads us to look at these things. So keep them coming.
Yeah, if you got anything else you'd like us to talk about, this one was a request from a listener. So hopefully that's been helpful, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you on the next one.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.